let's start. Is this a visualization? Yes or no? And the bad part is no. It's currently not a visualization. But let me tell you a little bit about a person called Minard. He's a great French person, and he wanted to illustrate how Napoleon marched from Poland here up to Moscow. And he did this in 1869 using pen and paper. Funny part being that this isn't actually Poland today, because this is some part of Ukraine or so. But he started with his army here, near this city here, with 422,000 soldiers. You can see that Minard here depicted the spatial dimension using a map in the background. So you got the villages here, you got the rivers, and you got Moscow up here. He decided that he wanted to show how Napoleon marched and show the army size he had by doing this band here, and the width of it being the amount of soldiers he has. So you can see here that he sends 60,000 soldiers up to a fort here, probably to keep his escape route secured. And as he continues, you can see here the width of this bar is 1/4 compared to this. So he arrives in Moscow with 100,000 soldiers. And he hadn't even actually fought any big battles before that. He had just lost those soldiers like everyone else trying to invade Moscow or Russia by the burned earth method. So the Swedes tried it, the Germans tried it, the French tried it. Genghis Khan was the only one who succeeded in actually conquering Moscow. So, up here, the battle starts. He's defeated and he needs to run home. So this is when Minard decides to use color in this chart. He takes another pen and he makes a black line here, showcasing how Napoleon escapes back to Poland. He also decides that this is an interesting event because this is during the winter, spring, and it's really cold out there. So he wanted to add temperature here as another attribute to his journey. So you can see here that these lines here go down to a temperature scale around 0 here and -30 down here. And like any French person in this century, the French have invented their own stuff, so this is a French temperature scale. This isn't actually Celsius. This is some French scale that's no longer used. But -30 here is actually around -40. And as Swedes, we know that -40 is darn cold. And imagine being a French person in an army, in this array, being chased by the Russians. It's not really a great event. So, he actually asks his soldiers up here to come and support him. You can even see here that he's lost some soldiers just sitting around. But they come here, his army gets bigger, and he reaches Beresina River. And this is one of the last battles where he's caught, and Russians has caught up to him, and he pulls half his army on one side of the river, and half the army survives by making it back. So this is his vanguard. This is where he loses half his soldiers protecting him. And he arrives back in Poland with 4,000 soldiers. 1 out of 100 survived. The 99 rest died. And now, this is visualization. Because a visualization is a mental thing happening in your mind. A visualization is never pixels or pen and papers, anything like that. A visualization is having data, having it displayed using lines or primitives or marks or something like that, and making the user understand the data by looking at this. So once you understand this image and has in your mind an image of what the data looks like, then it becomes a visualization. So that's a problem then with all those modern visualizations that depicts the flow of internet, that are all these funny things with flowers and all that stuff. Can you actually call it a visualization if a person doesn't understand it or not? So the professors argue even today. So, why are we using visualization? The main thing is that this is what a company today is using to represent data. Of course, you modern people in here never ever use Excel for storing data or for sharing data or for viewing data, I hope. Because if you do, how can you actually decipher anything from this picture up here? You can probably see that domestic sales is higher than international sales, But the only reason for that is because it's 4 digits here and 3 digits down here. Something up there is taller or wider or larger than something below. What happens if this is in thousands and this is in millions? You would still understand and believe this is a larger value compared to this because it is bigger. You can also see here that there's a downward trend here. There's all these values in the middle, around 500, 600. There's a small value here. But imagine how long that takes for you to analyze. And I'm meaning this is just 39 points of data. This isn't large. This isn't even small. But just looking at the line chart down here, which is the best way of deciphering and showing data over time and look at the trend, you can easily see that domestic sales are always higher than international sales because they are using the same measurement scale and it is in thousands. There's no thousands and millions compared to each other. This is always higher than this one. You can also easily see that this part here stands out because it's a lower value compared to everything else. And this is probably where your CEO wants to call the company's CFO and so on and ask, is this going to happen next year also or not? Because if we have low sales in August, we need to be prepared for that. Probably because of the Swedish vacation or European vacation. But something you can see also in this line chart, which you can never ever see up here, is that there's a trend. There's a zigzag pattern here that almost looks too perfect to be true. And that's because this company has something called cyclical sales. They start a new quarter here in January with low sales because no company has any money in the wallet. They are not able to buy your software or product. So they're saving their money for the end of the quarter. But you have some small sales and it's ramping up. But at the end of the quarter, the last 2 weeks, every company who still has a budget, who hasn't used all their money, is going to call this company and say, we got money to spare. Do you have anything to sell? Because if I don't buy something now, I will lose this money and get less money the next quarter. Easy to identify using a line chart, but believe me, never ever would you be seeing this up here. And if you're in a company using something like this, how can you expect this to happen? Because I can tell you that I've been in this area here on Iceland, traveling in a car from the west coast to the east coast with my mobile up all the time because people were calling our company and buying. Municipalities and other organizations had money at the end here and calling us because they needed to buy our stuff before the end of the year. I wasn't prepared for that then. I'm prepared for it now. And the reason why we can see things like this is because your brain is a pattern detecting machine. You want to see what stands out compared to everything else. It's really easy to see here that you got a trend here and there's something not aligned to the trend. You see that this one here isn't rotated as everything else, has a different color, different size, different shading, and different symbol. All those things you are primed to look at and realize that something stands out. So, let's do one of these. Is there anything in the picture here that stands out to you? And it's just total darkness because this is the jungle. This is where danger lives, but you can't see anything because it's at night. But if I add color to it, down here, there's a panther looking at you, wondering, what's for dinner? Should I eat you before or after the pizza? So we are really good at spotting a change when it comes to color. We can see something standing out if it's not camouflage because we need to be able to see this panther out here. Otherwise, we don't survive. Let's do a simple thing here. I'm going to showcase you a number or a string of numbers. And as soon as you find number 3, please raise your hand. And go. So that took a couple of seconds. Everything from 2 to 5 seconds. I've actually had people do 20 seconds. Because what you do is you start at the beginning. You start looking at this series here until you find it. Or you were lucky to start in the middle and going either left or right. Or you decided to start at the beginning, got bored, decided to start at the end, realized it's stupid. Let's continue from the beginning again. And that's why it can take 20 seconds. if I ask you to find a number again when I showcase it, just raise your hand. Easy. And the reason is we're using something called pre-attentive processing. So your brain is really slow. It takes around 1 second for you to react. That's why at driving school they tell you if you hit the brake, it will take, or if a car before you hit the brake, it will take you 1 second to hit it yourself because you need that time to just understand that something is happening before you. That's the same thing here. You think about raising a hand, it takes 1 second for it to happen. But I'm using something called pre-attentive processing. That means that this stands out compared to everything else. And I'm using a shortcut here where actually on the path from your eyes up to your brain is already processing this information and finding something standing out. So everything we can see in less than 250 milliseconds means it's pre-attentive processing. And we are reacting to that before even understanding that it exists. And that's why you can see something in front of you, like a snake or something, jump up and in the air realize it's a snake down there. Because your eyes have already understood it's danger there and your body has already reacted. You don't even have to think about, oh, may that be a snake or not? You're just jumping. Problem being that number 3 here really stands out compared to everything else because it's red against black. But we have around 8% of the males, 0.5% of the females are colorblind. How many in here are colorblind? Not know anyone here today, but around 5% of your users may be colorblind, one way or another. There are actually 20 different sorts of colorblindness or so out there. So if I showcase you number 1, what's on the left side? 16. Everyone able to see that? What's in the middle? So if you're not colorblind, you can easily see number 7. If you have one of these 20, you can't actually see anything. But I'm not too worried about that because colorblind people understand and know that they can't see number 7 here because they are used to being colorblind. What I'm really scared about is this part over here. Because what's the number here? Perfect. Number 3 means that you have a slight green color blindness and red. So you're actually not seeing the same data as everyone else. And this is what scares me because imagine sitting there looking at a number and not seeing the same number as everyone else. I'll give you an example. I think we really love something called KPI values. They are like your values that tell you if your company is doing good or bad. So this could be, for example, sales numbers. This could be in millions. How much have you sold? And if I want to show to you which value is good and which value is bad, what do? I color code it. I color code it red and green. So, of course, which one is good? Green. And which one is the green? Yeah, and 116 is bad. Now, I take this report to my superior or my CFO or someone like that. He analyzes it at his desk, and he picks up his phone and he says, sell everything. Because he's colorblind, and he just looked at this. And 116 is really great. We need to sell. We're doing really perfect. But everyone else is realizing that this is the value we're at right now, and this is how much we're losing every day. Simple tip, if you have to use colorblind pictures or fonts or colors, just put a symbol next to it to indicate if it's good or bad, because not everyone sees the same information as you do. It may not have to be a smiley because it kind of doesn't look professional, but it could be an arrow pointing up, down, or just a cross or a checkbox or whatever. Something telling a person who has to look at that what it is. Another thing. What is the highest value in here? What's the best color? Green. Blue. No one saying red? Of course, me being a click person, I think green is the most important color. And I can tell you that anyone from the Middle East also believes that green is the best color. If you're in the stock market, you're probably looking at the red one or orange down here because you are worried about your stocks going down. You're not ever looking for something green in a stock report that only has blue or red colors. But Okay, what's the lowest one? What's in the middle? You can't anyway agree upon which order these comes in. This is a problem with color, that they are very personal to us. We believe some colors are better than others.
I was thinking a little bit in mechanical engineering, you do stress analysis, and
Yeah.
you have the colors depicting the highest stress and the lowest.
Yeah.
So there should be some kind of standard of what color means what number.
I can tell you that there is a standard, but it's a standard of just understanding the hue. Meaning that we can use color sequences going from one dark color to one other dark color. And if I would take these colors here and slice them as a paper and put them in front of you, everyone would be able to actually put them in the correct order. Because you see the difference here in shades. You see the difference in if something is dark or something is light. You can understand that there's a shift here from one color to the other. There's actually a great app game on iPhone, probably Android, where you have to do all these things and arrange the colors and like a Sudoku and so on. It's a great pastime entertainment. So these are the ways that I can throw out this color scale to anyone, even a colorblind person, and they would understand what's the highest, what's the lowest. If I tell, okay, I have to tell them red is highest, blue is lowest. That could change depending on if it's good or bad. If it's temperature, probably something like this. If it's profit or losses, probably something like this. But it's still really easy to arrange them in an order. Encoding. So we are really great at spotting patterns, but we can only spot certain patterns. So is there anything in these rows here that stands out to you? Most of you have never seen it before, I guess. And if I tell you that I really love pink dolphins, is there anything in the rows standing out? So there was actually a dolphin inside the rows all the time. And if I go back here, you can still see it. I actually have people asking, could you go back to the first slide again? Because I don't trust it was in there. So we are really great at noticing patterns and patterns standing out, but we need to be primed with a pattern. If I showcase you a pink dolphin here, you're actually going to look in these rows and search for the pink dolphin. It doesn't make sense to you because you don't expect a pink dolphin to be in here. But if I prime you with this artifact in your mind, you're going to start associating it and start searching everywhere for it. Not saying that we're using pink dolphins in our platform, but you could use any kind of symbol and have people searching for that symbol and aid them in finding these discoveries. So how we use that? Let's take a sidestep into something else. This is called data attributes. This is how we in the scientific world or academic world define data. We divide it into something called quantitative data. These are your measurements such as cost, age, time, stress factors, and all that stuff. These are the ones that you can do mathematical operations on, such as add to them, subtract from them, divide them, multiply them. What you would call any number, really. These are your quantitative values. We've got ordinal data also, which means that I can't, for example, take a Monday and add it to a Tuesday, and it becomes a Wednesday. Or I can't take a Saturday and divide it by Tuesday and become something. So these are data that doesn't have a measurement value. So, but I can also say that they are divided. They are different ones. I can say that a Monday is not a Tuesday and a Tuesday is not a Friday. So they have different ones here. But something here with ordinal is that we can all agree upon in which order they come. No one is going to question me when I say Sunday comes after a Saturday, because this is always happening. There's no change in this order. The other stuff we got is nominal data. For example, males and female. We don't say that a male is a female, but we can't either say which one is better or which one is worse, because we're in here in Sweden. So they are nominal to us. And let me do an example of our company. So this is Anthony Dayton, our CTO, and this is Nishara, my product manager. So looking at this, I can easily say that this is nominal data. He's a male, she's a female. They don't have the same gender, but none of them is better or worse compared to the other. The ordinal data is their position. This is a CTO, this is a product manager. He, of course, has a higher position in the company compared to her. And within almost any company, I can always have a hierarchy and say who's top, who's bottom, and what's in between. So that's your ordinal data. Then you got employment and time in position as your quantitative data. So these are the values that I can say he's worked here 6 years longer than her, and he's worked here 3 times as longer as her. It's a really easy example. Let's get back to data encoding. So I showed you a pink dolphin. It's not something you're used to, so it's not something that you will see in a platform of visualization. What you rather will see is these, what we call marks. These are the ways that we describe data using visualization. One of them being a position, for example, in a scatter plot. You have a dot here, you have it along an axis, and you can measure what this dot aligns to. You have length, most often used in bar charts, where you look at the length of a bar and compare it to an axis to see a value. You're also pretty good at saying that this bar here is half the size compared to this one. This one is around 1/4 or 1/5. You got angle, which is really great for a line chart, because what we do on this here compared to the bar is that we're looking at this slope here. We're trying to identify what the degree is for the slope. And then you got area. So now we're starting to get really worse, because how many times does this small dot fit into this large one? Any estimate? 4? 5? 3? Actually, it's 3. So what you're doing is you're taking this small dot, putting inside this large dot, and realizing that you have some empty space. Let's add in 1 extra small dot, or 2. Same thing with volume. Have you ever stood there looking at a cake, trying to buy it at a coffee shop, and wondering which one is the biggest? It's really hard to compare volume to each other. You can only see if something is larger or smaller, but not how many times. And I need to change this slide because I should say different shapes instead. We're really good at distinguishing between these different shapes. But our problem being, we can't say which shape is better or worse than the other. Then we have different ways of color. The color hue, meaning that I can have one scale here that everyone can agree upon, going from this value to this value. Well, actually, these are separate colors. This is color saturation, where I can say this is one dark color and going to a light one. Same here with the contrast, and then we also have the texture. So these are the basic data encoding patterns we have that you can recognize and that you can use. And we had the different data types. Now the solution. This is the easy part. This is the quantitative data, because we can also divide it into interval data or ratio data. But if you have nominal data, such as gender, best way is to use the position, then different colors, then the texture, contrast, saturation, symbols, because symbols are different. We can assign males having a square, females having a circle. We don't say which one is better or which one is worse, and all the way down to volume. Ordinal data, same thing here with position, but then also the shades here are really great, because I can say something's coming before or after something, because it's really easy with the shades here, saying this is darker, this is lighter. And then interval ratio data, the measurement values, best thing still being in position, but then it's the bars, because we can measure a bar, we can compare bars to each other, and then all the way down here. But never can I code data as a measure using one of these symbols. And what happens if you do it wrong? You can easily see here that Japan makes the best car, and it's a Toyota. And the Audi and the BMW are made in Germany, and they are the worst cars, because this one here is at least 5 times as good as this one. Correct? And this is because they're using nominal data and encoding it as a bar down here. While they instead should have used positional data, saying that Audi and BMW, they are German cars, Chevrolet is a US, and of course Sweden used to have the Volvo. Need to update this slide sometime. Last one. I have asked you twice, is there anything standing out? So I'm asking you this for the 3rd time. Is there anything in this picture standing out? Yes, because there is a spider up there moving. And have you ever noticed sitting at home, reading a book, watching TV, that you can suddenly look across your shoulder because there's movement up there? We are very good, our human skills are very good at looking or spotting something changing, because we need to know if that spider is poisonous or not coming at us. Or if there's a panther out there from the jungle running towards us, we need to look across our shoulder and see it's coming towards us, because we better start running or we're dead. Now the problem is that it's using animation too much. This is really great, I don't mind it, but you need to have Hans Rosling standing here telling you China is doing a great leap, and then they kill all of them up because this bubble goes down and goes back up. But if I ask you to follow this blue bubble here, you probably already lost it. Because it's exactly the same technique birds use when flying together in a flock. They are constantly moving around each other because if you're a predator up here, an eagle or something, watching one of those birds, and that bird is constantly moving behind another bird, you're going to lose track of it. So they are constantly moving around to be safe. And I tell you, if you want to keep your data safe from your accountant or someone else, make it animated because you can never ever find that data point. It's really great with these things here showing you the trend, what's happening over time for all the countries in the world. But if I ask you to look at one of these dots, you're going to lose it. So that was what I would call the foundation of visualization. And these are things that are pretty common and everyone has agreed upon back since the 1980s, so no changes there. The thing is, Minard used it back in the 19th century. How are we using it today? So I showcase you our next product. Click you next, of course. And problem being that it's not commercially available yet, meaning that I have to show you this legal disclaimer telling you that anything I tell you now may or may not change because our roadmap always changes and so things. You're free to talk about it. There's no NDA, but anything I say, don't hold me responsible for it because I have shown you this slide. And the exam will be on Friday morning. So let's start it up. Oh yeah, I forgot to show you. As NComVA, we also won the 33 Pies, being one of the 33 hottest innovative companies in Sweden. Then, of course, we were acquired. So let's go to an executive dashboard. Let's create a new sheet. So I heard a word yesterday that I really liked because it kind of describes what we're doing. And it's called time to visualization. We want to make it easy for you as a user with data to create a visualization. Not saying that it's going to give you the greatest insight because you actually have to sit down, work through visualization, understand the data to understand what you're doing. But it should be easy to create visualization from your data that you have. So let's do an example. Let's do a bar chart, drag and drop it. Let's do what we call a dimension, which could be, for example, your products in a company. And look at something like the revenue. Are we gaining money or are we losing money on our products? That's how simple it should be. Just drag and drop the chart you're using, drag and drop the dimensions and measures needed to create it. And trust me, we will not be creating a chart unless you have fulfilled all criteria because it doesn't make sense to just have a dimension or a revenue in here. So I can easily now see that the best-selling product is the landslide white sugar. Weird company. And the worst-selling product at the end is actually those that we're doing negative values on. We're losing money on this one. This isn't click data, by the way. We're not selling sugar, as you can imagine. So, really easy now to interact with the data. I have what we call up here the focus, and I have down here what we call the context. Because if I have a bar chart up here, I can't actually show you all our 800 products in the company, because then I would have to squeeze them together. But I can show you a context down here that you can navigate through. And the best part is if I, for example, decide to sort this by something else, such as ABC, this one down here immediately gives me the highlights of the data. I can immediately go to any of these data points and see that these are some high values over here. The next part of visualization is that creating charts like these isn't that special. Minard did it back in the 19th century. Other people did it. One of the first visualizations being Adams doing the cost and inflation of the American economy. But the new thing here in visualization now is that it's interactive. It's suddenly much more possible to rearrange your data and doing selections in the data. So for example, if I want to see our top selling products, I just drag it down here and I confirm. And these are the focus of my query now. Looking at the top 21 selling products. Or I can, for example, say that I want to look at certain data set along the axis. or I just want to circle some of them down here and mark them, or actually press them. These are the changes in visualization now that is much more interactive, and you can start working with your data. Let's do another one. Let's do a scatter plot, because we're interested in looking how our salespeople are performing. So add a dimension of salespeople. And add a measure such as the margin and the revenue. Now you got a scatter plot. Really easy to create. We need one dimension, which are these dots, and we need two measures, the y-axis and the x-axis. Something you can see here now that you have is that, for example, if you would be using one of our competitors, Excel, they would show you something like this, because they put a label on everything. And that's something that you would probably do in any visualization software, until you decide that you actually want to turn it off, because it doesn't make sense to have all those labels around here. What we're doing instead, and what Minard did, and what everyone else did who've done visualization before, is if there's space for a label, put a label there. If there's no space for a label, ignore it. Difference being that Minard knew about his data, he could find the highlights, he could put a label on the things that were interesting, but the things that weren't interesting, you had no idea what it was. That's why we have something called details on demand. If you're interested in something, just hover above it and get the details of it. You can easily see what the dots are. Or for example, you could just zoom in on the scatter plot, and you will see the labels starting to appear. Now this is actually better on an iPad, because if on an iPad, just pinch, pan, click on the dot that you're interested in. And now you can see that labels are appearing. I can easily select the ones I'm interested in and focus on them, and all the labels are there. Same thing here, interaction is really great. I should be able to select the dots I'm interested in along the x-axis, along the y-axis, confirm the selection, and further my investigation. Or for example, I can see that there's three outliers down here. Just circle them and say that they're interesting. Realize that I forgot these over here, and just add them to selection and confirming. So we want to give the user as many ways as possible to interact with the data, because we don't know in what way they are doing selections. Maybe looking at a value, maybe looking at a person, maybe looking at an outlier. Because a scatter plot is great for three things. It's great for showing you the relation in the data. I can see here that this almost all points here are along one same axis. That's the relation. It's also great for finding clusters. I can see here that most data points are over here. There's a small cluster here, and there's a small cluster here. And the third thing is I can use a scatter plot to find outliers. I have these points over here and these points over here that are outside of everyone else. That's what you use a scatter plot for. So we need to be able to give the user ways of interacting and finding all these three things. Now the great part of not only being gorgeous, which our CTO used to call us, is that we're also genius. So for example, if I'm looking at my salespeople over here, and I'm looking at my products over here, they are probably associated to each other. Meaning that my salespeople are selling these products, or my products are being sold by these salespeople. So I can easily look here and see that I have some people here having a really low margin. What products are they selling? Confirm, and I can see that these two salespeople are selling red spade pimento loaf, various white Zinfandel wine. So these salespeople are performing badly, and the reason why is because they're selling these products. Or for example, in the bar chart here, I can see that I have some products that are negative values. Just select them. And I can see who are the salespeople selling these, what's the revenue, what's the margin, and why is Caddy over here compared to everyone else. So easy to do visualization. Now the problem is that if we give you access to all these charts and all this data, you're going to screw it up. Because you're going to make use of different visualizations and different data that doesn't make sense to you. So for example, let's create a pie chart. So drag it out. You look at your salespeople, and you look at the revenue. And you get a pie chart. Let's highlight this one. Let's make some changes. Let's do something like this. Now the bad part of doing something good is you have to undo it to make it look bad. So, this is what you may end up creating. So if I'm asking you now, who's our best salesperson? Who has the highest revenue? Can you find him? You need to start looking here around every edge here until you find this large value. And the only reason you can find it is because this value here, because you can't actually see all these different colors here. So let's add back the color. So when we create a pie chart, we use the different ways of coloring it using different colors. And they are also color-safe colors. Now, if I ask you to find the fourth best salesperson, who's that? I actually have no idea. So what we do with a pie chart is that we sort it from the largest to the smallest, because there often isn't any reason why you have a slice at a certain position. But if I have it from largest to smallest, I can easily see Edward being the fourth best salesperson. Easy? Another thing, what we use a pie chart for is comparing one slice to the whole. We want to see how many percentages he's doing compared to everything else. We actually don't want to compare one slice here to another, because as you noticed before when I asked you to find the fourth best salesperson, you couldn't find it. You're really bad at comparing angles to each other because they are hard to compare to each other. Another thing is that it's easy to compare angles to each other if they're larger than 25 degrees. If they're smaller than 25 degrees, it gets harder because they're so small. So another thing we do when you create a chart is that we limit the amount of data you see. We only showcase you the top 10 values, and then we bucket everything else together as others. Meaning that you can easily distinguish each slice in here. And if you're interested in looking what else people are doing, you can just select the others and then drill down here. And you will get the next 10 people. You can drill further down and you will get the next 10 people. Okay, the bad thing is you actually have to remember how many times you drill down. But you got this indication up here of how much you've selected and how much you have left. So we don't actually want to call it default settings anymore, because default setting means that the programmer put in some value that probably made sense when he was looking at the data. We're using something we call auto instead. So we're looking at what chart you're creating, what data you're adding to it, and what's the size of the screen. And then we apply the correct setting based on that. So for example, you can take the dimension label so that it's visible or not. But if you put it on auto, we will actually showcase it to it because it makes sense to show you that you have sales rep people here. But if you have this shown on a smaller client, we actually remove it because there's no space for this up here any longer. And this is why we can have one platform, one visualization on a big projector, on a big screen at your office, up here, or even on a mobile phone. Because we scale away the less important information until you get to the smallest part here. Because we are using the auto setting and analyzing what are you looking at and showcasing as much as you can as long as possible. Of course, you can always go in here and override the settings. The last part before beer and the pizza, which arrives soon hopefully, is, let's say for example I've made some interesting discoveries in here. How do I share this? Not everyone is a visualization expert, which you are about to become because you are now attended this course. There are actually people out there who doesn't understand anything of what I'm showing because they haven't been here. So what we do, and what many other companies do, is something called storytelling. And Ingmar over there, during the pizza and the beer, he can talk all about it because he's the product manager of it. So I'll try to make him happy by showcasing it in a good way. So, you have, for example, found something interesting. You have, for example, done a selection here on your 10 best salespeople, and you want to record it and share it to someone else. You send them a print screen, and they don't understand anything. So you have to add some extra text in their mail to make them understand what's happening. We don't really like that. What we do instead is we take a snapshot of this chart. We say, save this chart with all the settings available, with the selection available, and with the data available. And then we create a story. So I can go in here into story mode, and I can create a new story. I can take this snapshot here, drag it in, put it in here, add some effects, red text, for example, top 10 people. I can add some more description. And I can even say that I want to highlight the largest value. This is a way for me to take the data, narrow it down to what's interesting through a snapshot, saving the state of the chart, and then sending it to someone else. And you can also go up here and do a presentation. Because how many people do you think actually takes a live software to the X team to do a presentation, and all they're doing is begging, hoping it works, hoping it works. That's why you take a print screen. That's why they use PowerPoint instead. But what we have is a story mode here where we will take a snapshot of the chart so you know that this chart will always be displayed like this. It's never ever going to change. So you can go in here, you can start your presentation, talk about the high margin sales, talk about the low margin sales. And the difference here in storytelling compared to a PowerPoint is that you get that darn stupid question saying, what happens if we change these parameters? And you say, I'm going to back to my desktop, I'm going to make a new inquiry, I'm going to send you a picture of what it looks like. What we do instead with storytelling is that everything is live. I can go back to the source, and I can apply the selections and get back to the chart that I was using. And I can tell him that, okay, let's remove hot dogs from our calculation and just look at the others. Let's take a new snapshot. Let's go back into story mode. And let's customize this slide by adding a new picture here and by adding an effect such as the lowest value. Missed. And then you can continue the story with a new snapshot. Because storytelling is about taking away the analytics part of the visualization and showcasing your findings, but always being able to go back to the source of it. Yeah. So, a great new way for you to actually be able to go in there, make a presentation, and knowing it will work every time. And I think the pizza arrived, and my time is up, but I'll be available for you now.
One question.
Yeah?
Can you, in the scatter, can you put like a third dimension kind of on the bubbles so the bubbles get bigger?
Let's take a scatter plot, and let's add something as... yeah, okay. Let's just look at the expenses versus targets. So yeah, large bubble important, small bubble less important, because size is about telling you if it's important or not. So yeah. Yeah, so I think I'm done. If there's no further questions, then pizza is available and let's discuss. Thank you.